I think we have to give credit where credit is due. A couple of years ago, Matt Campbell was seen as the next big coach in college football and was even getting serious interest from the NFL. Except after he fell off a little bit, everyone was quick to throw stones at him and say that he was done and that he was going to fizzle out and that Iowa State was just a pretender. Well, it looks like a couple years later, Matt Campbell has rebuilt the Cyclones and gotten his reputation back. Currently, the Clones have still not lost a game in late October. They are arguably the top team in the Big 12 and have a legit shot at going to the college football playoff. The Cyclones' magic has come back in 2024, and today I want to talk about how Matt Campbell built the Iowa State program, his fall off, and how he rebuilt and saved the team. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the insane rise of Iowa State football. So for some quick background info on Iowa State and Matt Campbell, as you guys know, Iowa State has not exactly been the most prominent school in its history, but they have had their moments. Previous to Matt Campbell, they were in the Paul Rhodes era from 2009 to 2015, and that didn't exactly do great. You had 1 year of Gene Chizik, and before that you had Dan McCarney. Again, Iowa State was never near the top, and they really needed a guy who would help turn things around. That's where they would turn to Matt Campbell. After playing at both Pitt and Mount Union, he'd eventually go into coaching as a GA at Bowling Green and would quickly rise up the ladder, eventually spending time with Bowling Green and Mount Union before coaching the offensive line at Toledo. From 2010 to 2011, he became the offensive coordinator, and then from 2012 to 2015, he was the head man for the Rockets. They decided to promote from within, and during his time there, he had a 35-15 record. The team was ranked number 19 at one point, and the most thrilling moment was that victory on the road against Arkansas, which was a big SEC team. They also had guys like Logan Woodside and Kareem Hunt play for them, so Toledo is one of the better schools in the MAC and the Group of Five, and after being the MAC Coach of the Year, he decided to take the head coaching job at Iowa State. He apparently got hired on his birthday, and his first year at Iowa State was difficult. The team ended up going 3-9, but going into 2017, they would get better. They would end up axing their quarterback Jacob Park in favor of Kyle Kempt. That would pretty much help the team immediately, as after starting out 2-2, they went on the road and beat number 3 Oklahoma 38-31. This was one of the biggest wins in school history and got the ball rolling. From there, they beat Kansas and Texas Tech before they got ranked number 25 and upset a top 5 TCU team, which was a thriller. Sadly, they would go 2-3 to finish the year, but they would beat number 20 Memphis in the Liberty Bowl. Okay, that was the first big year of Matt Campbell, and when he got a ridiculous amount of hype. In 2018, Brock Purdy became the starting quarterback, and David Montgomery was also a superstar. Still, though, they were picked to finish near the bottom of the Big 12, but in total in 2018, they would knock off 2 ranked teams in both number 6 West Virginia and number 25 Oklahoma State, and would get an opportunity to go to the Alamo Bowl, where they would lose to number 13 Washington State 28-26, and they spent the back half of the year ranked. Alright, Matt Campbell was getting more and more hype, and in 2020 they were supposed to be even better. This time they were picked to finish 3rd in the conference, but sadly they didn't start out great. They barely beat Northern Iowa in 3 overtimes in week 1, before dropping games to both number 19 Iowa and Baylor. Still though, like always, they would bounce back and would eventually get to a bowl game in which they would play number 15 Notre Dame in the Camping World Bowl and get blown out 33-9. In 2020, the team also had a weird start, as they'd lose at home to Billy Napier in Louisiana after being a top 25 team, and then from there they'd end up cruising. They win 8 of their next 9 games, with their only loss coming on the road to Oklahoma State, and they even knocked off both Oklahoma and Texas. Ultimately, they would lose to Oklahoma in a rematch in the Big 12 championship game, but they would beat Oregon in a bowl game. 2021 is when Iowa State had the most hype ever. Matt Campbell was surely seen as the next great coach, had turned down NFL offers, and returned to core players that some thought could get into the college football playoff. They'd end up beating Northern Iowa in week 1 by 6, which was extremely concerning, before then blowing the season in week 2 to number 10 Iowa, losing the Cyhawk game 27-17. A win over UNLV didn't do much to calm the nerves, and after that they lose to Baylor 31-29, and their college football playoff hype was over, and the team was 2-2 by the end of September. Luckily, October would turn things around as they would beat Kansas and Kansas State before knocking off number 8 Oklahoma State, getting them back to the polls at number 22. Sadly, though, they'd blow it to West Virginia in a 1-score game before they would go back home and beat Texas, and it looked like they were starting to salvage their season. Still, though, those 3 losses didn't look great, and they would finish the season losing 3 out of 4, including games on the road against Texas Tech and Oklahoma, and losing in the Cheez-It Bowl against number 19 Clemson. Phew, that was a lot. So, in his first 6 years, Matt Campbell had gone to bowl games in 5 of those 6 seasons. They finished with an over 500 record in 5 of the 6 years in the conference, went 2-3 in bowl games, and had a ton of star players. This was coming from an Iowa State team that didn't recruit well, was typically behind a lot of other programs in the conference, and didn't exactly have the same prestige and aura as other schools. Matt Campbell definitely could have left, but instead he chose to stick back around, and that's where the downfall sort of begins. In 2022, Iowa State would have to move on from Brock Purdy, and luckily they had a guy for the job. His name was Hunter Deckers, and he was a huge four-star recruit from near the area, and they returned one of the best receivers in college football in Xavier Hutchinson. Sadly though, this would not end up turning to wins, as Iowa State would really struggle in 2022, having their worst season since 2016. Despite starting out 3-0, they then go on a 5-game losing streak and get to an 0-5 mark in the conference. Their lone win the rest of the year came against West Virginia 31-14, and then they would dive bomb, losing to Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, and TCU to finish at 4-8 with a 1-8 mark in the conference. The only bright side, though, is that they lost most of these games close, as the Kansas game was 3 points, K-State was 1 point, Texas was 3 points, Oklahoma State was 6 points, and Texas Tech was 4 points. Also, Baylor was 7 points. Almost all of their losses came by single digits, and if you flipped a couple things, they could have been a team that won 9 or 10 games. That's what's crazy, but those little margins would bite Iowa State badly. As I said, they would go 4-8 with a 1-8 mark in the conference, and it felt like the sky was falling. Everyone was patting Matt Campbell's back on the way to being fired. People were making absurd claims, talking about how he was a fluke, how he was a fraud, and how they couldn't wait for him to get fired. It seemed like it came from mostly blue blood fans who didn't like that Iowa State was seeing success under him, and in 2023, things wouldn't exactly get all that much better. Hunter Deckers was suspended from the NCAA for sports gambling, and Rocco Becht would take over as the starting quarterback. They'd beat Northern Iowa in Week 1, but again, they just couldn't start out the season great. They lost to Iowa in Week 2, and then ended up blowing it on the road to the Ohio Bobcats in Week 3. This was a horrific loss, but luckily they would bounce back. They won 4 of their next 5 games, and were now 5-3 going into a matchup with Kansas. Sadly, they would lose to the number 21 Jayhawks, but after beating BYU, they would get bowl eligible in early November, and they are now 6-4. To finish the year, they'd lose to Texas, and then would beat number 19 K-State on the road to go 7-5 with a 6-3 mark in the conference. They'd end up going to a bowl game where they would end up losing to Memphis. There really weren't that many expectations going into 2024, but Matt Campbell has totally changed the narrative, and now we get to talk about how the Cyclones are currently 7-0. Week 8 of the NFL season is now upon us, and as a Colts fan, I've been watching how Anthony Richards has been playing, and I'm not quite impressed with them. That's why this weekend, if I were to place a bet, I would say that the Texans are going to easily beat the Colts. But if you're as convicted as I am about a certain bet, be sure to place your bet with MyBookie. This season, MyBookie is pulling out all the stops with incredible promotions like a weekly risk-free boost on Thursdays where you can bet without a sweat. If your bet hits, you win big. If it doesn't, forget it. MyBookie will refund your wager. But that's just the beginning. MyBookie is giving away hundreds of thousands in prizes with their Super Survivor and Square contests. Get your entries now in for your shot at huge cash rewards. When you're ready to get started, be sure to use my promo code Fisher50 and make sure to get some extra cash on top of your first deposit. If you type in Fisher50, you'll get up to $1,000 in a welcome bonus bet plus a $10 casino chip. MyBookie's tiered bonuses make it easy to deposit with crypto or with credit, and the bigger your deposit, the bigger your bonus. The bonus would be 100% match up to $1,000 plus a $10 casino chip. With MyBookie, you can bet on anything, anywhere, at any time, and make your season a winning season. Be sure to check out my link down below and use my promo code Fisher50. So what's made Iowa State football good in 2024? Well, they have a good defense, a good coach, a solid quarterback, and they've had some luck on their hands. After Rocco Becht was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school, he started the 2023 season, and he didn't end up getting replaced by hotshot recruit J.J. Cole from the 23 class either. Becht was the son of a former NFL star, and so far he's thrown for 1,700 yards with 11 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, and has completed 61% of his passes. He's been a pretty good game manager. In terms of the running back position, they are full of depth. Carson Hansen, Jalen Jackson, and Abu Sama III all have over 300 yards, and Hansen leads the way with 7 touchdowns. They're balanced and have depth at an important position. In terms of the receiving game, Jalen Knoll and Jaden Higgins are both stars this year, as Knoll and Higgins have combined nearly 80 catches for 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns. They have both been threats through the air. And then in terms of the defense, Malik Verdon has led the way with 53 tackles. J.R. Singleton leads the team with 3 sacks. Miles Purchase has 4 pass deflections, and Jontez Williams has 4 interceptions. Stars have formed on both sides of the ball. So yeah, Iowa State's had a good year statistically, but how have they done in terms of their record? Well, in week 1, they played against North Dakota and won that game pretty easily, 21-3. In week 2, against number 21 Iowa, this was going to show what they were made of. After getting kicked around in the first half, Iowa State would have a tremendous second half, bounce back, and eventually win 20-19 after stopping Iowa late. They beat their top 25 rival on the road and cruised to 2-0. In week 3, they came home and destroyed Arkansas State 52-7, and now the Cyclones were 3-0. To open up Big 12 play, they got to play the worst team in the conference, that was the Houston Cougars, and they won that game very easily, 20-0. Okay, so through the first month of the year, the Cyclones were 4-0, and they were already having a successful season. But the last 3 games have proved their legitimacy. Against Baylor, Iowa State ended up trailing 14-3, but they would put on a clinic in the second half, scoring touchdown after touchdown, eventually winning 43-21 and getting a huge victory in that one. The following week, they played against West Virginia, and now the Cyclones were as high as number 11 in the country. West Virginia was desperate for a win and got off to a 7-0 start, but from there, Iowa State would score the next 4 touchdowns, getting up 28-10, before a late touchdown from West Virginia made it a little bit closer. Iowa State had dominated on the road in Morgantown, and then this past week, they needed a little bit of luck. And then this past weekend, they once again needed a little bit of luck. Against UCF, a team on a 3-game losing streak, Iowa State was now a top 10 squad at home, and this game would go back and forth. At halftime, they were down 21-14, and eventually were down 28-14. Iowa State would absolutely have to mount the comeback, and Rocco Beck would do that. He'd go in for a touchdown early in the third quarter, and then find Jaden Higgins at the end of the third quarter, and they'd end up tying up the game, except wait, the PAT was blocked. It was 28-27 going into the fourth, and then UCF scored an early touchdown. Things were in danger Tory now, as Iowa State had to settle for a field goal and were still down 5. Luckily, they ended up getting a stop before they would drive down the field, and with 30 seconds to go, Rocco Beck would run the ball in for a touchdown and get the 2-point conversion, and they would take a 3-point lead. Iowa State then secured the ball on defense and won 38-35 to get to 7-0 with a 4-0 mark in the conference and another thrilling victory just like that Iowa game. So far this year, the Cyclones are 4-0 in the conference with wins over UCF, West Virginia, Baylor, and Houston, and many will immediately bat an eye and say they haven't played anybody. To a degree, I can't necessarily disagree with them, as those 4 teams will finish near the bottom of the conference. For the rest of the year, they'll have a bye this week, as they will not play, and then they'll play Texas Tech in the beginning of November, before going on the road to Kansas, then coming home against Cincinnati, then a road trip to Utah, before a huge game with number 16 Kansas State. I don't know how good Texas Tech is, so I honestly think they're going to win that game. I also see them beating Kansas, and I see them beating Cincinnati. Cincinnati is the toughest team of those 3, but those last 2 games could be difficult. Utah is never easy to beat. They always seem to upset teams at the right time, and they should be finding and hopefully they may have found their stride by then. Honestly, I think there's a better chance they beat number 16 K-State at home than they beat Utah on the road, but there is a path for Iowa State to make the college football playoff. I truly think the Big 12 will be a one-bid league unless BYU and Iowa State both win out, unless there's 2 one-loss teams after the Big 12 championship, and my money would be that the Cyclones get there and play against BYU. Utah and K-State are not going to go down that easily though, but Iowa State and Matt Campbell have had a great year. They're currently 7-0 through the month of October, and nobody really expected that. Rocco Beck has come out of nowhere, and Iowa State's back to their old ways of having a ton of players and a ton of depth who just want to win and go under the radar. That's what Matt Campbell and the Cyclones do best, and right now they're firing on all cylinders. They got a good quarterback, a good running game, good receivers, and a good defense, and combine that with a little bit of luck and a down Big 12, and that is a recipe for making the playoff in the modern era. But what do you guys think? If you're an Iowa State fan, what do you think of this year's Cyclones team? What has made them so good, and how do you think they'll finish the year? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out some of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.